But if you've done all that work, then by God, let somebody else read it. You've done the heavy lifting, and a lot of people let their fears rule how they approach life. Not to say that I'm not afraid of things, but if I put that work in there, I'm going to slap a cover at it and put it out in the world and see who else enjoys it.
Hello, this is Tab Bartley, and you are listening to the Oath We Took podcast, the show that tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines that served. This is our 10th episode, and I'm joined today by Sirrah Medeiros. She is the reason for this podcast. I know so many amazing Marines who hesitate to tell their stories. Their stories hold so much power and so many life lessons. Oftentimes, though, their stories go untold. Not every Marine's story is the same. What is the same is the oath that we all took. I'm honored today to have Sirrah on to share a piece of her story. We will talk about her journey in the Marine Corps and how she transitioned to an author and publisher from a Marine. We'll even talk about an opportunity for female veterans to get involved in a horror anthology. The first question I have for you is, why did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
I went in the Marine Corps basically to get my college paid for. I had originally, long story behind all of this, but the basis of it is that I had planned on going to college. I was accepted to go to school. Financial wind up being a big thing in that. And although my neighbor was a Marine Corps recruiter, I actually went to the Air Force first because I had two brothers that were in the Air Force. That recruiter was not the kindest person. I had braces on my teeth. And my next door neighbor met me in the hallway and said, what are you doing here? Gave him a little synopsis. And he wouldn't talk to me until I talked to all of the other services. So needless to say, I did a comparison, and the Marine Corps was the way that I wanted to go.
And how long did you serve in the Marine Corps?
I was in a little over 4 years. So went in October of 85 and came out in January of 90. I was on dental hold. They put braces on my teeth. So that didn't really work either. So, so I got out in January of 90.
And what was your job or MOS in the Marine Corps?
My first MOS was 1171. It used to be called a basic hygiene equipment operator. I'm not sure what, I think water dogs is the general term these days. I don't even know what the official name is, MOS. And then my secondary was 0151, so admin.
Perfect. And so you did one enlistment, and your goal was to pay for college with it, correct?
It was. And then, which was probably a good thing, because when I originally was going to go to college, my plan was finance, because we grew up in a very difficult childhood, I guess I would say, pretty poor. So finance was a thing, which I'm good at accounting, but I hate doing it day in and day out. So the water purification side showed me a lot of the environmental issues that were going on in the world, Camp Lejeune water issues. I was there during that time. But so my focus definitely became much more biology based, environmental based. So the Marine Corps provided that opportunity to kind of, take a few minutes to find out what I really wanted to focus on going to school. It took me a little longer because then I wound up getting married and having kids and traveling all around with my husband. But eventually I did get my degree in environmental management. So it served its purpose. It just took me a little while longer to get there than what I planned.
And what's so cool is, so I ran across a post on, I think it was a female Marine group, where you were asking for female veterans who were interested to submit stories for a book that you are publishing. And so, we just learned a little bit about your time in the Marine Corps, but how do you go from Marine to author and publisher? How, what was kind of like the in-between, and how did you get there?
Oh, there were so many in-betweens. So I married somebody else who was, stayed in the Marine Corps, retired in the Marine Corps, and pretty much reinvented myself everywhere we went to. So I taught when we were in Japan. I was doing conversational English and teaching American cooking all in the same time. That was a blast. When I got my degree, we were in Southern Florida. I did not speak Spanish. So a lot of the environmental jobs took Spanish. That was the primary. I had to be dual language, just not one of my fortes. So I wound up teaching. And then during that time, actually, I met some writing groups online. Lots changed when I got out in 90. The internet was not a thing. So met some friends that I used to know, and then met a lot of other new writers along the way, and submitted to various competitions, that type of thing. I used to write when you were in high school, and poetry and that kind of stuff, but never really took it seriously. And then that's when it just kind of developed a little bit. I got published, actually the first time without even knowing it. I bought the book to support some other folks that were in the writing group, and found my story there. But that's not how it's supposed to happen. So just, you're supposed to have contracts and the whole 9 yards. And then from that, I actually wound up, my husband was stationed separate from us while our kids were in high school for a little while, and did the geo-bachelor thing. And so it's funny, that creative writing that I did wound up getting me my defense contracting back into that, which I swore I'd never do again. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. Back in, I think that was 2009, 2010. And so I did 10 years or so of defense contracting, a lot of technical writing, a lot of illustration with that, formatting books, that type of thing. And very all or nothing personality. I was very dedicated to doing my defense work and serving in a different way. But I'm 55 now, so I wanted to kind of break away from that and really get back to the creative side that I started to really enjoy, and had to kind of take a break from that. And then that brought us to where we are now. I've written a few things, and then self-published them. I started my own business pretty much just to do my own self-publishing, and maybe bring on, do some, either an online magazine. I really wasn't thinking about anthologies, but the interview that I did last November was with the Horror Writers Association. Every November they do a Veterans in Horror Spotlight. And so I did an interview, and one of the questions was, what other horror writers do you know that are veterans? And the only ones that I knew were men. So I could rattle off names of guys, and they write a lot of stories that have their, some military aspect to it, or they talk more about it than what women do. As far as my experience goes, I know there are a lot of women that do. Most of them write nonfiction, I think. If they're writing fiction, I just don't think that they've talked about it much, or I haven't come across them. So that stuck a seed, in my mind, as far as who else is out there that's a woman veteran who's writing horror or writing other fiction. There are a lot of women that are writing nonfiction, but they don't cross over and write much fiction. So I stewed on that for a while. I did some research. There were several other, probably 3 or 4 projects that were started. Calls were made, open calls for submissions. I could not find those projects that were completed or published. So I did some digging. I looked through the ladies that did the same thing that I did last November, and ran across probably half a dozen women, and they've been invited. I've received some of their stories. I'm probably going to take all of their stories that have been submitted so far. They have probably more experience than I do lately. I had several short stories written and published back in 2010, 2011. Getting back into this, I tend to dive in and just study everything that I need to, ask the questions that I need to. I'm usually not afraid of a no, not afraid to, go after something once an idea hits me. So I think the Marine Corps has a lot to do with that. We kind of just go after what we want. So I'm doing that. And I hope that anybody who is thinking about writing or has maybe had the bug to do that, but has been afraid to maybe put the attempt out there. Anthologies are a great way to get started in any genre, but it's really about highlighting other people's talents. If they write about the military, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too. The anthology is based on a on hauntings, because that can take a traditional horror aspect, or it can go towards trauma, psychological hauntings, things that have bothered you from your past. Lots of different ways to go, and that's why I chose the theme that I did. And I hope that it resonates with other folks.
And see, it's so cool that you say that, because initially when I saw it, all I was thinking of was like straight like a horror movie Saw type thing. And then the fact that you just, worded it that way, I just think back to service and so many things that were haunting or were affecting, or that would I from your definition and from what you're explaining would actually be in that horror realm. And so if nobody has any experience with writing, what can you kind of like Barney style or Barney explain what I'm not going to say it right. What anthology is.
So, right. You'll hear different terms. So a collection is usually written by one author. So they'll have a collection of short stories or a collection of novelettes, whatever. Usually you can have anywhere from 3 or 4 stories by that one person, or 20. A short story collection or a poetry collection is going to be by one author. An anthology has multiple authors. So we're shooting for a certain number. I don't know if we'll get there with the open call. That's why it's open so wide. There are very few women writers in the horror genre. It's been growing over the past decade or so, but it's one of the genres that in the past, I think, has had fewer women recognized maybe than other genres. And it has been changing over time. But when you put together then women veterans, military veterans into that mix, it's an even smaller pool. So the call is wider in order to give people time, and this won't be published until sometime mid 2024, hoping for spring, but it just really depends on how many people come out to answer this, and how good the writing is, and the story development, and that type of thing along the way.
And so can you tell me a little bit about the social media posts that you put out and what you're looking for and who can apply and kind of who can be potentially involved in this?
Okay, sure. I think I posted it maybe a month ago. I really don't, middle of February. Somebody else who had put together a Other Terrors, if you haven't read that, it's really good, gave me some advice as far as, because of such a narrow pool of people that may submit, to open it as wide as I could. So I did that as quickly as I could. A couple of days later, I put out the video pretty much on Facebook and Instagram for anything with Tundra Swan Press, and the website. But it's out for internationally, as long as you can tell me what you did in your service. I do know of an Australian Army woman veteran that has been invited to participate. I don't know if she'll submit anything yet or not, but it's not just US based women veterans. But I do ask that everybody be honorable and actually be a military veteran who identifies as a woman. And short stories are 2,000 to 4,000 words. And then if I like where it's going, but it needs editing, I'll work with people on that. But I want it, they should do their best that they can before they submit it. Poetry is up to 60 lines. That's because there are a few styles of writing that go to 60 lines. And it just works best. Nothing crazy as far as making shapes out of your words for a poem, or, crazy things. There's a lot of different things that you can do with poetry, but simple formatting. And then poems will get, if they're accepted, will be at least $10 in payment. And then if it's a long poem and that word count is higher than what would be paid for $10, then those folks will make more, just depending on their word count in those 60 lines, if they go that far. Right now, my word count payment is 3 cents a word. I'm going to do all the upfront cost on this myself. But I will have a Kickstarter that goes after submission calls are in and I see where we are. And hopefully we'll get to, professional rates are at least 5 cents a word. So I'd like to get that. And then some stretch goals. At the moment, I have an illustrator who is a Marine Corps veteran. So hoping that she's going to, it'll be based off of the stories that come in, you know, some illustrations to do some print work, maybe postcards, stickers, you know, we're trying to work out those things once the stories start to come in. So it's a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of work, but I really want to highlight the work of folks that I already know that are military horror writers, you know, women veterans, but then to encourage those who are, you know, on the sidelines, either writing in another genre and they want to try a stab at horror, or are just looking to transition out. And this is something that they've always wanted to do. It really is an opportunity for anybody who wants to put a you know, a twist on it and submit something. So.
And for you, why did you want to do this? Because you're right, especially on your end, it's a ton of work. And why was it so important for you to do something like this and to target, you know, female veterans and have them be a part of what you're doing?
Well, I think, again, I think now is a time where women veterans are getting seen more, getting recognized more. However, it's not always been the case, and it is hard to get our voices heard sometimes, to get recognized for the contribution that they've had in whatever their service has been in the past. But to encourage them to take advantage of an opportunity that doesn't come around very much. Like I said, the horror community, and other genres too. I think that it's once you get a name, people really follow those, but it's hard to get your name out there starting out. And anthologies provide a perfect opportunity for that. I'm not very well known, so that's why the Kickstarter is not only for to get the anthology out there and get a reader base to start with, but to help these folks get a leg in, especially if they're new to creative writing and they're trying to get out there, that kind of gets people interested faster than just putting out there without much advertising and you know, your traditional route, I guess.
And what has been some of the personal impact you've been a writer for years, but especially moving back to the creative side, what has been some of the like personal impact that's had on you, being able to be creative and to follow that path? Like, why are you continuing with it and why do you want to do it? You know what I mean?
I enjoy coming up with something that's totally different and not based in reality. There are a lot of nonfiction. People make a lot of money on nonfiction. I'm not a big reader of, I read a lot of articles, but I'm not a big book reader of nonfiction. My husband is like crazy, but it's just not one of my things. And I love sitting down and coming up with something totally unexpected, because I try to do outlines, but usually a story goes in a completely different direction than what you think it's going to do from that outline or your initial idea even. I mean, characters really, your mindset and your subconscious kind of meld together after a while, and your characters take on a personality of their own. And where you think it's going to go, you know, an idea will pop in your head going, no, that character is just not willing to do that. And they want to do this. And so it's quite fascinating to create something from literally nothing and then put it out there for the world to, you know, they're either going to love it or they're going to hate it. But I write first for me. And if I think that it's good enough to get published or somebody else might have interest in it, then it's out there. And once it's out there, it's going to take a life of its own. People are either going to love it, they're going to hate it, you know, don't care. I would just say that if you love it or you hate it and you've read it, put a review, because indie and self-published authors, that's their ticket. You know, it's hard to get your word out. It's hard to market. I've paid money for Amazon ads that have gone absolutely nowhere. But reviews and then being able to get the word out based on those reviews, whether they're good or bad. I mean, I've bought books that have had 1-star reviews because I just thought, whoever wrote that review was passionate enough about whatever that, gosh, I need to go check out that book for myself. So I'm not saying people need to put 4 and 5 star reviews out there, but just put honest reviews. And that really helps people in the industry.
And I think it's interesting too that like you just created something that is going to live forever. Like it's out there, right? And I just love that your mindset is like I liked it, or I enjoyed it, or it was a story I felt I needed to tell and I was good with it, so I put it out there. And I just think that is such a cool way to see it, because like that's true. And not everything's for everybody, right? Like there's like not everything is for everybody, and to feel like to have this story in you that you just need to get out, and then you get it out, and now it's living past you and forever, and it is just out there. Like how much of an impact that must personally be, and how cool does that feel?
It's absolutely terrifying to a degree, and I would tell folks that are, I know people that have manuscripts done and they sit in their homes and they do nothing with them. And I would just say that if you've done all that work, because a lot of it is just getting it done, getting through the first draft. I mean, editing is a pain in the butt. I don't know if I can cuss on here. So
you can. You can.
I'm usually I cuss a lot, but if you've done all that work, then by God, let somebody else read it. You've done the heavy lifting, and a lot of people let their fears rule how they approach life. Not to say that I'm not afraid of things, but if I put that work in there, I'm going to slap a cover at it and put it out in the world and see who else enjoys it. So far feedback has been great. I don't know if it's, a lot of people are afraid to say what they think, but hey, say what you think and let people know, and then share it. If you loved it, share it. If you didn't love it, then maybe share that too, but let them know why. So
yeah. And it's, gosh, that I don't know, that feels so powerful to me, you saying that. And as scary as it must be, like you were saying, how has the journey like grown you as a person, or like had the impact? Because you talked earlier, there's things that like you felt like, because of the Marine Corps, like maybe it's the Marine in you, that here's the problem and you're going to figure it out and you're going to find the solution and you're going to do the things. How has the journey then of like becoming an author and your own publisher, how has that helped to mold you as well?
I'm a very independent person. So first of all, my parents both died when I was a teenager. So I had nothing to fall back on. So I have to make things, or had to make things work. I'm 55 now. So it's, life is pretty even now. I made enough money that I'm, early retired unless stocks dump again. I might have to take a real job at that point. But and I think the Marine Corps did this for me to a degree, was that at that time, I joined when I was 17. I graduated high school at 17. And I just learned that I could do it, that I could take care of myself. I also had 6 older brothers. So, I am, and I'm the only girl. I grew up a little tomboyish and rugged, I guess. And the Marine Corps it's tough for a lot of people. Again, I came in October of 85. I don't know if I could do the Crucible, even when I was in really good shape. So, let's put it in time perspective. But I was athletic. Boot camp didn't faze me. I was really ready to go out and travel the world and do what needed to be done for myself, to see what I wanted to do with my life. And it just showed me that pretty much if you put your mind to something, you're going to be okay. And if you want something to be successful, then you got to put the hard work into it, and don't quit on yourself. So a lot of people stop themselves, but you're not going to get where you want to go if you stop and change, pivot. And there's times to do that too in life, but if you really want something, just keep putting the work in it. It'll come. You'll be successful. You may fail along the way, but you definitely need to put the time in and put the effort in.
And so just going back to the project, is this something that maybe somebody who is a first-time writer or has never produced, do you feel like this would be a good opportunity for them to get something out there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one reason why, again, I chose the theme that I did, because I didn't want it to be classic monsters, although those are fabulous. There's some great stuff out there right now. But if you're not a horror writer, but you've maybe loved watching movies, or that was me originally. I was a big, huge horror movie fan, but didn't read a lot of it. And it took me a little while, really to get into reading it. And then I realized, gosh, I mean, it's just like every other book. It's better to read it than it is to watch the movie or the TV program or whatever. But again, I go back to pretty much any genre that is writing or putting out anthologies. It is a great opportunity for new writers to try their hand at it. And I don't know, there's sometimes I don't get feedback when I've submitted to other anthologies. I will tell you that I will give feedback. I will give you a response. Some places don't respond. I think on my submission call, I put in that I'll give a response within 60 days. I plan to stick to that no matter what how long it takes me. But I'll also give feedback on writing. I've been hit up about memoirs. I don't do them myself, but I do a lot of mentoring, even though I'm new at this, but I've been writing for a very long time. Technical writing, it's hard to make that transition, but I'll help people connect to whom I think is a good connection for them, depending on their genre. I do a lot of developmental editing, mainly for friends, because it'll take me away from my own writing. I've had to tell some friends, hey, I've done all that I can, you need to go pay an editor now, because I got to get back to my own stuff. But my whole life has been kind of about service. So I'm going to help folks out. I'm going to charge. There's a lot of folks that charge a lot of money in the industry for things that you can either find for free, or to me, if you find a mentor out there, there are a lot of them that are great, that aren't going to nickel and dime you to death, because it's hard to make money at this business. But I'll help who I can if this is, something that they want to do.
And what is the timeline for submission? If somebody is interested in this, what is the steps that they would take to be a part of it?
So the submission call, I try to be as very detailed as I possibly could, especially for new folks. There's the Shun format is pretty standard in the industry. The link is on the submission call. And if you need the website, tenderswanpress.com, everything's on the submission call there. And then really follow that format. It tells you step by step when you hit that link on how to submit something. And the deadline is April 30th. I would say I've had a few that I've not even read that have submitted without any information. Please provide a short bio, who you are, what you've written in the past, if you have a website. If you don't have those things, that's fine. The whole reason for the open call is to find new talent. But make sure with this, because this call is only for women military veterans who want to submit to this call, that you provide what branch of service you were in. Again, it's not a US only thing, it's an international call. And I would hope that we get some very interesting stories based on that international aspect to it. But again, that's really it. It's up to 4,000 words on a short story. I would prefer you do your own edits a few times, have somebody else read it, send it in. If it's close, but it's not quite right, we're going to work on it, and we're going to, partner on it as far as getting it where it needs to be able to publish it. But I mean, not everybody's going to get a yes, and if you don't, I'm going to let you know what the reason is behind that. So either you can submit it somewhere else, or, work on your craft, whatever the case may be.
Which is such a huge value. Again, because you were mentioning that before. I mean, you've submitted to things and never had any sort of a response or a feedback. And even just to know, like, hey, here's what you need to do, or here's some things you can improve on. I mean, that alone is a huge help in when you're trying to do anything, especially when you're trying to do anything new, to know you're going to get some feedback and guidance.
Exactly. And I can understand there have been some submission calls that I know that they've had hundreds, submit. But starting out, it can be very discouraging, and some people may turn away from, something they really want to do, and they just don't know how to get started. It's not that hard to get started. It's just, you've got to have folks that are willing to communicate, and you would hope that writers communicate. And so I'm happy to talk with folks after they've submitted, even if they, I think I have it on my website. I'm not really sure, but if somebody's trying to, I don't know anything really about traditional publishing. I've never tried to get an agent. I've never submitted anything to a big, the big box folks, Penguin, Random House, any of those. My big thing is I'm 55. My mother died at 55. So I'm very much about going after, and just getting it out there for everybody. It's not a money-making thing for me per se. It's more of a hobby that if I wind up writing, 4 or 5 books a year, great. If I do one, great. But this is an opportunity for folks who really want to start out and don't know how to start out, that I hope that we can, even if I don't accept the story, then I can either push it to the right direction for them to go submit somewhere else, or work on, their development, their characters, whatever the case may be. But I'm willing to do that for other people and help them figure it out.
And again, I think that's so amazing. And it goes back to, like, I don't know, I think, like, once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine, right? And there's something always in you, and you always have this connection to Marines. And I just see being an author and being in that community of having something published and something out there and like permanently in existence, how it just correlates and how similar it is in a way in regards to that. And I thoroughly appreciate you sharing a piece of your story, and then having this opportunity and wanting to get as many female veterans involved in it, and getting them involved in what you're doing and get their stories out there. And so the last question I have for you is, if you had to take the oath again, would you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a defining moment in my life, I think, to go in and serve, especially in the Marine Corps. I mean, we can be a little arrogant because of how small our community is compared to others. Hey, I've got one of my brothers that was in the Air Force has since passed, but my other one, he retired out of the Air Force, and we don't hesitate to goof on each other back and forth all the time. And so we've hit all the services. My grandfather was Army, World War I. My father was Navy, World War II. My brothers were Air Force. I'm the only girl, the only Marine. So, take that for what it's worth. But absolutely. I mean, it's done a lot for me. And then I think in retrospect, because of that, I pretty much the whole life has been about service. So.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of Sirrah's story. You now know one more Marine and one more piece of Marine Corps history. Her service matters. Her stories matter. Not every Marine story is the same. We didn't all join the Marine Corps for the same reason. What is the same is the oath that we all took. An oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I'm going to challenge you to continue to listen to their stories instead.